Good afternoon. My name is Chris Leak, and I'm the chair of the City County Planning Board. I now call to order the June 11th, 2020 meeting, which will be conducted remotely. Due to the state of emergency, all planning board members are participating remotely. I will now ask our planning director, Aaron King, to call the roll.
George Bryan.
Here.
Melinda Dunnigan.
Sorry, here.
Jason Grubbs.
Present.
Tommy Hicks.
Here.
Clarence Lamb.
Here.
Chris Leak.
Here.
Johnny Seegers.
Here.
Brenda Smith.
Okay, here we go. Here.
Jack Steelman.
Here.
Thank you, Mr. King. When there is a vote, a roll call vote would be conducted. Each board member would be recognized and asked to clearly state their vote for the record. All guests participating in this remote meeting, either through Zoom or by phone, will remain muted until recognized by the board for comment. Today's meeting is being broadcast live on TV 13 and is also being live streamed at the city's website. The meeting will also be replayed on TV 13 tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. and Sunday at 4 p.m. Our first order of business today will be the consent agenda. These are items for which the petitioner is requesting withdrawal or continuance, or items for which staff has recommended approval and no one has signed up to speak in opposition. For our public hearings today, each side will have a total of 12 minutes. There is no rebuttal period. Once you have been recognized by the board, staff will unmute your microphone so that you can provide your comments. After the public hearing is closed and the board goes into work session, no one is permitted to speak unless the board asks them a question. The items under section B of our agenda will require final action by the elected body, either the city council or county commissioners. As such, votes taken today are recommendations which are considered by the city council or board of commissioners during this review of the request. For special use district zoning requests, the petitioner must identify the intended use or uses of the site and give specific details on how the site will be developed. If you are addressing the board today, we would ask that before you begin your comments, please give us your name, your address, and zip code for the record. Our first item of business is the approval of the minutes of the May 28th meeting. Are there any additions or corrections? If not, board, what is your pleasure?
Move approval, Clarence.
That's approved by Mr. Lamb, seconded by Mr. Bryan. All those in favor? No, then we need to call the roll. I'm sorry, Mr. King, please call the roll.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. George Bryan.
Yes.
Melinda Dunnigan.
Yes.
Jason Grubbs.
Yes.
Tommy Hicks.
Yes.
Clarence Lamb.
Yes.
Chris Leak.
Yes.
Johnny Seegers.
Yes.
Brenda Smith.
Yes.
Jack Steelman.
Yes.
Thank you. That's unanimous. Thank you. Now I'm going to recognize Mr. Desmond Corley for the consent agenda.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think we need to get Amy sharing the screen so we can get our presentation started. Mr. Chair, members of the board, the first item on the consent agenda is B2. It's case W3445, a request to rezone from GB to EL. This is about 3.35 acres on the north side of North Liberty Street between Patterson Avenue and Chestnut Street. We actually received a request earlier today from the applicant to continue this petition for 30 days to the July Planning Board meeting. Because we received it after the deadline for automatic continuance, the board will need to vote on whether to accept that request to continue. So at this time, that's all I have to say at this point. With regard to this case, the board will need to make a motion and vote according to their wishes.
Okay. Is there any discussion on this before? Can I get a motion, please?
Also moved, Jack.
All right, it's moved by
Second.
Jack, by Mr. Stillman, seconded by
Clarence.
Mr. Lamb. Thank you. Mr. King, will you please call the roll?
Yes. George Bryan,
Yes.
Melinda Dunnigan,
Yes.
Jason Grubbs,
Yes.
Tommy Hicks,
Yes.
Clarence Lamb,
Yes.
Chris Leak,
Yes.
Johnny Seegers,
Yes.
Brenda Smith,
Yes.
Jack Steelman.
Yes.
Passes unanimously.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the board. The next item on the consent agenda is C1, which is a preliminary subdivision by the name of Petticoat Junction. It's a 13-lot subdivision on 3.78 acres on the west side of Brewer Road, south of Ethel Drive. This slide just shows you the proposed layout of the preliminary subdivision. Every lot, of course, meets the minimum UDO requirements of 9,000 square feet. Staff looked at this site plan or this proposed subdivision and found that it meets all minimum UDO requirements. So we recommend that you approve this subdivision.
Move approval, Clarence.
Motion by Mr. Lamb. Is there a second?
Second, Jason Grubbs.
Second by Mr. Grubbs. Thank you. Any further discussion? Mr. King, would you please call the roll?
Yes. George Bryan,
Yes.
Melinda Dunnigan,
Yes.
Jason Grubbs,
Yes.
Tommy Hicks,
Yes.
Clarence Lamb,
Yes.
Chris Leak,
Yes.
Johnny Seegers,
Yes.
Brenda Smith,
Yes.
Jack Steelman.
Yes.
That passes unanimously.
Thank you, board. The next item on the consent agenda is C2, which is a preliminary subdivision by the name of Cliffdale Woods. There are 29 lots in this subdivision on almost 15 acres, the west side of North Cliffdale Drive, south of Guinevere Lane. The next slide is going to show you the preliminary subdivision plan. Again, you can see where those 29 lots are proposed to be laid out. Because this is just a preliminary subdivision, all of the lots meet the minimum dimensional requirements for RS9. There were some concerns, and the board should have received those concerns in an email about some aspects of the proposed development. Some people are here in observance. Remember, preliminary subdivision items are not public hearings, but just wanted to make the board aware that some people are here who have some interest in hearing what you have to say. Because the preliminary subdivision plan meets UDO requirements, staff recommends approval of the subdivision.
Move approval, Clarence.
Motion by Mr. Lamb,
Second, Tommy Hicks.
second by Mr. Hicks. Any further discussion?
Yes. Chairman, I had a question about the, on the site plan, sort of in the middle, close to the bottom of the site. There's a circle that says a borrow pit, and it is very close to another property line, and I'm wondering, is this going to be a permanent pile, or is this a temporary thing?
Desmond, I'll let you take a crack at that if you'd like.
Okay, borrow pits are typically, or at least when you're talking about subdivision development, are typically just temporary. They are a product of the grading process that's necessary for the subdivision to be developed eventually. It's my understanding that when the development is done, then that goes away.
So is there any assurance that that would happen?
We can ask the applicants if that is their intent. We usually don't see where this pit is proposed to be located at this stage. They usually show that as part of their grading permit application. So I'm not able to tell you that we have those assurances. They haven't given them to us as of this moment, but if that's something you would like to ask the applicant, they're here.
Yes, can we do that?
Yeah, so I think we've got, I believe, is it Greg Garrett and Vince Townsend, I believe, are joining us, and they're the applicants. If you were joining us, guys, if you could unmute yourself, give your name and address for the record, and provide a response to those questions.
Hey, good afternoon, Chairman, member of the board. My name is Greg Garrett, and I represent the developer for this project, and would be happy to provide some answers about that circle area.
Okay, could you also please state your address and zip code, please?
Sure. I reside.
I can't hear you.
Yeah, Greg, you were cutting out there.
Can you hear me?
Now we can.
Okay. All right. So as I was saying, good afternoon, Chairman, member of the boards. My name is Greg Garrett, and I represent the developer of this project. I reside at 6420 Hampton Knoll Road. That's in Clemens 27012.
Thank you.
And I'm happy to provide answers about the that notation of topsoil stockpile borrow pit area. So I did, Desmond was gracious enough to send me some of the correspondence, I think maybe the same correspondence that you board members have received. I did reach out to that property owner this morning, as a matter of fact, and talk to them. And basically I'll share with you what I told them is this is actually a detail that typically is not shown on a plan like this. This is more of a construction kind of sequence detail that, as Desmond indicated, is not typically shown at this stage of the development process. However, what I can tell you is that in the process of going through the review process with the staff, we had to make a pretty significant adjustment to our plan. We were once planning that we would not have to do any stormwater detention because our density is less than 2 units an acre. But as my engineer, Vince Townsend, and he's here with me if you have questions for him, as we were working through those comments with the stormwater department, it became evident that we would have to do a stormwater detention pond to control the quantity. And so when that came up, obviously, you know, these ponds are a fairly big area. And so he, you know, changed the plan to show the pond, which is kind of right in the middle of the site, you know, on the southern border. And putting the pond there, that we've got a lot of excess dirt that's going to be coming out of that pond. And so realizing that, he was just thinking forward and trying to anticipate issues. He identified that area that really and truly is one of the few areas on this property where we could actually place excess soil. And so that is what is noted in that oval, you know, shaped circle down at the southern middle of the property there. And what I can tell you, and this is what I shared with the gentleman that I spoke to this morning, is that it actually will be I think a better terminology to use for that would actually be a berm. It's going to be soil, excess soil that will need to be placed there. But the intent would be that it would be aesthetically pleasing. It wouldn't be just like a mountain of dirt that would hang out there and not have any shape to it and just look way out of place. You know, our plan would be to make it like a earthen berm and make it aesthetically pleasing, perhaps some landscaping on top of it, but it'd be grassed. And the concerns that the gentleman that I spoke to this morning, their concerns was what it would look like. And I told them, you know, we are just as concerned about that, you know, because we'll be marketing these homes and we wouldn't want just a stockpile of dirt to hang there. What I think, again, the intention of the was to identify that we've got some excess dirt that we're going to have because of this pond, and what do we do with it? And so he put that on the plan, but to call it a stockpile, I think maybe that was that was probably maybe inaccurate, notation on the plan.
Thank you. Ms. Dunnigan, did that address your question?
That did. Thank you very much.
All right.
Could I ask staff a question?
Yes, Mr. Bryan.
Is Bovine Drive considered a stub street? And if so, what's the potential future?
Bovine Drive is not a stub street. They're actually to the south of this development is an existing neighborhood. And there's another street from that neighborhood. It's a private street that kind of goes up to this general area. We had a lot of discussion with engineering about whether that should be a stub, whether it should connect to the existing private street, whether that was feasible, whether the city would, require the right-of-way necessary to maintain the existing private street in the existing neighborhood. And we eventually came to the conclusion that that isn't something that makes sense from the city's perspective as far as right-of-way and maintenance. So that what you see Bovine Drive is going to terminate where you see it now.
And I guess it must have been determined that there wasn't a need for a fire truck to turn around and things like that.
The site plan shows a turnaround. It looks like kind of a shared driveway between those two lots down there on the west side of Bovine Drive.
So that's what that little bump out is there?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. That answers it nicely.
Any further discussion from any of the board members? If not, what is the pleasure of the board?
Mr. Chair, I'll call the roll for you.
All right.
George Bryan,
Yes.
Melinda Dunnigan,
Yes.
Jason Grubbs,
Yes.
Tommy Hicks,
Yes.
Clarence Lamb,
Yes.
Chris Leak,
Yes.
Johnny Seegers,
Yes.
Brenda Smith,
yes,
Jack Steelman.
Yes.
That passes unanimously.
Thank you.
And the next item on the consent agenda is C3, which is actually a request to remove some lots from a previously approved subdivision by the name of Lockhurst. You can see on this image, those are the lots that are proposed to be removed. Staff doesn't see any issue with this request. There is no loss to connectivity. The street that's on the approved subdivision plan was proposed to be a cul-de-sac anyway. In your materials that you got for this meeting, you'll see, the applicant included their proposed subdivision of these lots after they're removed from the existing subdivision that shows that there's no internal impact to the Lockhurst subdivision by this request. The staff, seeing no issues with the request, recommends that the board approve this change.
Move approval, Clarence.
Motion by Mr. Lamb,
Second.
second by Mr. Bryan. Any further discussion? Mr. King, will you please call the roll?
George Bryan,
Yes.
Melinda Dunnigan,
Yes.
Jason Grubbs,
Yes.
Tommy Hicks,
Yes.
Clarence Lamb,
Yes.
Chris Leak,
Yes.
Johnny Seegers,
Yes.
Brenda Smith,
yes,
Jack Steelman.
Yes.
That passes unanimously.
Mr. Chair, the next item is going to be case B1, and Gary Roberts is going to present that for the board.
Members of the board, next on your agenda is zoning document 44. The petition Industry Hill Properties LLC IH 853. It's a 1.67 acre located on the northwest 8th Street between North Trade and Oak Street, and the request is a use limited rezoning from limited industrial to the entertainment district. This is Legacy's growth management plan. It's located within the Pink Urban Neighborhoods Growth Management Area 2, where Legacy does recommend reuse and revitalization of underutilized commercial and industrial areas. This is a zoning map showing the subject property in yellow. It's the current location of Combs Wholesale Produce, located again on the north side of 8th Street between North Trade and Oak Street. Again, it's currently zoned limited industrial, as is the property to the north and to the west. You have some central business zoning across the street, and then you could see there's a considerable amount of entertainment zoning directly across North Trade Street. This area and areas further to the northeast and east have experienced a significant amount of e-zoning in the last 5 or 6 years. And this is an aerial image showing the subject property there, the development patterns surrounding the site. You have the public safety building located just directly southwest of the site. Elliott Locksmith located directly across Oak Street. Some industrial uses further to the north, entertainment uses across both Trade Street and West 8th Street. Few images on site. This is looking east on 8th Street. The site is to the left. This is looking across 8th Street into downtown, and looking west at the corner of 8th and Oak Street from the subject property, looking towards Cherry Street. And one last image. This is from the site looking into downtown there at the intersection of 8th Street and North Trade. This is the area plan of the subject property. It's in the North Central Area Plan, and it's located within a special land use area, the North Trade Street Potential Mixed Use Area, which, as you can see, it recognizes the existing industrial purple use of the subject property, but the area plan notes that this area is really ripe for redevelopment, repurposing, reinvestment there for mixed use development and pedestrian oriented in scale, which the request is generally consistent with that. So as I mentioned, Legacy use of vacant and underutilized sites, which this it's considered a central area, which again recommends big North Trade Street area for much more flexible use on the site, being limited industrial. There's no real opportunity for retail service, which the E zoning allow. However, there are two oriented uses included in the request, and these are convenience store and drive-through that are not typically conducive to create an environment in its downtown section. So those two are allowed in the E district. The E district is not specifically limited to downtown. It is in the growth management area 2 and 2, but there's a potential for the E district place and maybe a or more sparsely populated location to where maybe these two uses would be appropriate. But because of their auto-oriented nature, staff are not supportive of these two uses. Just a food and drug store, which is included, but this allows for gasoline sales. That's what that use is. It's a service station, if you will, that allows gasoline, which is clearly auto-oriented. The second use is restaurant with drive-through. So we're certainly the use of restaurant, as we have many in that general area. The drive-through aspect really kind of undermines the pedestrian-oriented character that we're trying to shoot for in a portion of downtown. So staff does recommend approval with the removal of convenience store and drive-through service, and I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Mr. Roberts, I have a question.
Yes.
On the plan, it looked like there was some for institutional that was the recommendation, and I'm wondering what that was from or why that.
Yes, that looks like it's more pertaining to the parking lot there. And so actually, I'm not sure what the previous instance was in the area plan when it was being done. Right now, the aerial that's shown for institutional is pretty area.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe
Gary, I may defer to Kirk's on the call, and he may about why that was coded blue land use plan.
Slide for just a second. Melinda, just looking at that, nothing is jumping off the top of my head, but one thing that I imagine is a likely candidate is it was also based on ownership information. So regardless of what the use, if that property was owned by one of the surrounding institutions at the time of the area plan, then we would have coded it blue for the institutional land use.
Okay, thank you.
any other
Question?
I have just one, please.
All right.
Yes.
All specific, Gary, to this, but to the larger scale entertainment area overall. You have correctly pointed that over the past couple of years, a significant amount of resentment in this area. My question is, when we begin to see site plan of actions so we can see how council is fit together?
Well, that's certainly could be on petitioners.
Sure.
I mean, I don't answer that.
I'll jump in on that one, Jack. You know, we use special use zoning as a tool to answer some of those questions, and we do that a lot when we're close to residential area specific use that we need a site answer. So, you know, if you have a development that's going in against residential, you're a lot of times see a site plan come with it. We need to know how that against adjacent residents. In this area where you've got a mixture of uses, you know, industrial and commercial and entertainment zone, we have need to go with a special use, you know, we've trouble with the limited use. These go, you know, site specific conditions that we would recommend a special use request. The ones we've seen so far, we have not seen that case.
Are there any other questions for staff?
I'm sorry, there is one other question I'd ask. It's just that in the staff report for the neighborhood, there was for the parcel that was on SME, one that's north of here.
Mhm.
So I'm just with more clarification about the neighborhood, because that really included in the staff report. What I mean is the information, not the information pertaining to this site. Clear that up.
Yes, that's the option. The petitioner's representative is present, so maybe that.
Okay, thank you. So at this point now, I'm on the public hearing. Mr. King, anyone here to speak on the matter?
Mr. Chairman, I'm not sure where Mr. King is, but I will say that yes, we do. We have both the petitioner. I know Mr. Dickey's here. I'm not sure who the other petitioners may be, but then we also have at least one person signed up in opposition.
Yeah,
Okay.
apologies. I was there talking when I was muted, so I was trying to do two things at once. So Chris is right. Yeah, Luke Dickey, Drew Gersmeyer are the two folks in support, and John, I think it's pronounced Kleindienst, is here in opposition. So Mr. Dickey or Mr. Gersmeyer, whoever wants to go first, feel free to unmute yourself, provide your name and address for the record.
Yep, good afternoon. Luke Dickey with Stimmel Associates, 601 North Trade Street, Suite 200, Winston-Salem, North Carolina, 27101. And so thank you for the opportunity. To start off, Melinda, to answer your question, I'm not sure, we may have accidentally sent in the one we had previously, but we did send out a letter in the exact same format as that talked about what this site was being changed to, and it did showed that the other site, just so they had put it in reference, because they had gotten basically a letter based for the same thing. We tried to discern between the two. So I'll go back and check our records to make sure that we did not accidentally just re-forward the previous case's zoning letter, and then the checks, because we did provide a letter to the neighbors about the E district zoning.
Okay.
Amy, if you would pull up the presentation that we had sent in, please. Again, this is located in Industry Hill, the 8th Street site. Next slide, please. Site location, as Gary had pointed out in his presentation, right there on 8th Street with Trade Street to the east and Oak Street to the west. Directly north of this site is the case that you just heard last month, or actually a few weeks ago, in regards to the PBL zoning. So that will be for a different use at this point. So part of that parcel of this site was located on that. So now we're moving forward with this from LI to the EL request for rezoning. Next slide, please. Again, as Gary had pointed out, in the north central Winston-Salem area plan, where this site is located, in that North Trade Street potential mixed use area, it does support the conversion of this light industrial for a mixture of potential new development for residential or commercial and office type uses. And the E zoning district is supportive of that conversion. Next slide, please. Overall, what I'm going to show you here is in the LI zoning district. So overall, what's allowed in the current zoning district of LI, our request is basically taking out 42 of the 55 permitted uses that are located in the LI zoning. With the request to the E zoning, of course, we're adding in uses that are currently not permitted in LI, and that predominantly consists, of course, of retail type uses and residential uses and the restaurant uses as described. Next slide, please. Here's the neighborhood outreach exhibit that we had sent. So again, we basically had sent everything out to the same neighbors that we had before on the previous case. We did receive responses from two property owners. One is Mr. Kleindienst, who's on the phone today, and he expressed his concerns in regards to the zoning. We discussed that with him and encouraged him, of course, to join in the meeting to discuss that with you today. The other property owner was also in the Oak Street condominiums, and they sent an email to Gary Roberts and myself in regards to questions of what the E district is and also the noise ordinance requirements for that. Next slide, please. Reasons to approve and look at this is, one, it provides for a mixed use opportunity, and of course in a redeveloping area of downtown that is transitioning from former industrial uses. We are consistent with the North Central Winston-Salem area plan. It's requesting, it eliminates basically 42 uses that are currently allowed under the LI zoning. And again, with the added uses for the E district is predominantly retail and residential uses, which supports that mixed use and provides flexibility for future development options. I'd like to kind of discuss, as the staff report had mentioned, there's basically two uses overall that are still of concern for their recommendation for approval, and that is, of course, the convenience store and the restaurant with drive-through uses. While we're talking about pedestrian, oriented development, the area plan does recommend this still also supporting the LI type zoning. And so LI zoning does not have very pedestrian oriented businesses within that. Matter of fact, I probably would say that it's even worse than what we're requesting for the convenience store and for the restaurant with drive-through. In that case, we have plenty of E-zoning in this area. Most of it has been E-limited, but directly across the street where the Ramcat is and the others, that is also E straight up zoning general with no other restrictions on it as well. Looking at the area, we just thought that we want to maximize our opportunities for development and to include those uses since those are allowed in the E district. Additionally, as COVID-19 has kind of shown, if you have a restaurant use that goes in now, the ones that have been really successful are the ones that still have drive-throughs to them. And so from a service standpoint, looking at a convenience store, if that's kind of the use that decides to go here, there aren't many convenience stores, gas pump stations within the downtown area at all to service any of the residents. They're mostly located way out on the periphery or further on down in other areas. So that's not to preclude that those type of uses would go on the site, since we are just a limited use zoning request, but we wanted to keep the total amount of options of potential uses for redevelopment of this site open for the property owner. Drew Gerstmeyer is also on the phone with us, and he is representing as the property owner. So if you have any questions in regards from him, or if he has an additional input, that he can provide that to you as well. So just thank you for the opportunity to present this to you this afternoon. If you have any questions, we're happy to answer those. Thank you.
So Mr. Dickey, I have a question, and you may not be able to answer this, but it looks like the staff recommendation is approval with the exception of the clean store and restaurant with drive-through. Do you know if the petitioner, is this something they're leaning towards, or they just want that in there just because they want it in there?
I believe it's basically because they want it in there just to provide their flexibility. They're not leaning towards those type of uses at this time. But Drew, you could answer that question probably better than I can.
Sure. Hello, everyone. Drew Gerstmeyer, 1315 South Main, 27127. It just, as Nick said, nothing specific that we're planning for, just trying to keep the maximum options available per the zoning.
Mr. Chairman, this is Clarence. I've got a question for staff while we're on this topic.
All right.
Aaron or whomever, if I understand it correctly, so we are not eliminating these permitted uses when we do e-zoning in this area. Is that correct, or is that not correct?
So the petitioner has asked for those uses, convenience store and restaurant with drive-through. Staff has suggested they remove them, and they are not in agreement with that. So the request that's submitted to you includes those uses.
Right, I understand that. My question is, how have we been treating previous cases?
Any general use case would allow that. I'm not sure on the limited one, the couple other limiteds that we've done, I'm not 100% sure. I know that there was a limited that was slightly to the east that we eliminated a couple of the uses that would have been nightclub related because they were in close proximity to some churches, but I can't remember if those other uses have been stricken from those cases off the top of my head.
Yeah, I am in sympathy with the drive-through service request. Starbucks is closing. I'm sure everybody read today 300 stores, and they're going to open 600 stores, but about 70% of their business is drive-through. And I know that that may not be pedestrian friendly. I'm not sure, but that is that's a new thing. No doubt about it. It's probably going to be with us for a while. This need for easy, I don't know if it's drive-through, but easy delivery type stuff and ease of pickup and stuff like that. Anyway, that's it. So I'm on comment. We'll wait until after we finish with the public hearing for the rest. I'm sorry.
Thank you.
So Clarence, I can just add real quickly to your comment. This is not news to the applicant. We had a session Friday morning, and with respect to the use restaurant without drive-through, staff's not 100% opposed to ruling that out. If somebody could bring in a uniquely designed building that addresses that corner and could accommodate drive-through service maybe towards the rear, because if you look at that intersection, it's framed up nicely by Ramcat, the big Winston warehouse, and the petitioners are actually building a brand new office building right there on the southeast corner to frame it up. And as you know, just by their general nature, convenience stores and restaurants with drive-through are generally pulled back with, circulation aisles and parking around. So that's why our concern is because those two really do not lend themselves to framing that intersection and that pedestrian environment. So staff not 100% opposed to restaurant if somebody could come in with a condition that has a building pulled up and circulation in the back.
Right. Thank you.
That offers a great example of my interest at some point in time in seeing site plans.
Mr. Chairman, if I may add that Mr. Lamb's question about the other EL zonings, that large 9+ EL zoning that was approved in 2015 directly northwest, it did not include restaurant with drive-through. It included restaurant without drive-through, but it did include convenience store.
All right,
Thank you, Gary.
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, just to give you a status, the public hearing for the proponent still has slightly over 6 minutes left. If there's anyone else here to speak in favor.
Okay. Is there anyone here else who would like to speak in favor?
Mr. Chairman, I only see Mr. Dickey and Mr. Gersmeyer in support, and if they are done with their comments, Mr. Kleindentz is the only opponent we have on the call for this case.
All right, Mr. Kleindentz, if they're done, if you could unmute yourself and please give us your name and your address and zip code for the record, please.
My name is John Kleindentz. I live at 836 Oak in the condominium building near this proposed zoning change. My zip code is 27101. I hesitate to say that I'm speaking in opposition. I'm speaking with concerns. I'm very much in favor of the development of that property. As it is now, it's the back of a warehouse and a lot of parking space that doesn't belong in an area that just adjoins the central downtown area. Honestly, Mr. King very well summed up my concerns about the current zoning request. I very much dislike the idea of a gas station and a convenience store combined. I dislike a restaurant with a drive-through. I also have serious concerns about a shopping center. If shopping center means a strip mall where you have stores set back away from the street and cars driving and parking in front, shopping center to me sounds like something that belongs on Peters Creek Parkway, not on a downtown street. Let's face it, 8th Street used to be the boundary of what was downtown Winston-Salem. 8th Street is no longer that hard boundary. You guys have expanded the entertainment zone beyond that. You've nicely used old buildings that have a certain downtown profile to them to put a gas station, to put a shopping center. That's a real shame for the aesthetics of downtown Winston-Salem. So I very much would like to see you think of a way to rezone it to get a lot of these additional opportunities for the developer, but take away the tendency that I see in this proposal to make it a suburban area and not a downtown central business kind of area. The last comment I will make that makes me feel that way is the fact that you did rezone the site just north of that at your last meeting to be PB, and you did it with a lot of approval from the area residents because they gave the general site development plan that would be residential, that would have a fairly significant parking garage and residential development on that lot. That sounds like a great PB where the buildings are going to be up to the sidewalk. It's going to be very walkable. You're going to have limited traffic because people don't come and go from their apartments or condos, whichever it turns out to be. They don't do that every half hour, every 15 minutes. If you put a shopping center or a convenience store or a drive-through restaurant, 8th Street is going to become a nightmare. There is not an opportunity to put good entrances and exits into that area that is not going to slow down traffic on 8th Street. Traffic is already terrible at rush hours. That's when people would use a gas station at rush hour. So I just feel overall there's a need to preserve the downtown business flavor blended into entertainment. That's great. We all love the breweries. We love the impact, but those are not high traffic. They're nice buildings that blend in with downtown. So unless somebody has a question for me, I wish that the planning department could come up with a different zoning category for that area that would allow flexible development, but would not destroy the pedestrian nature that they said they were trying to achieve in this area. Thank you very much.
Mr. Chairman, there are 8 minutes left if there's anyone else in opposition.
We don't have anyone else signed up in opposition.
If no one else has anything, I'm going to close the public hearing. What is the pleasure of the board? Any discussion?
And Mr. Chair, I'll just jump in real quick before you guys start talking. As a reminder on this, we're going to need a motion on consistency with a comprehensive plan, and then we'll need a second motion on the actual zoning case itself.
Right, correct.
Okay. I've got a question for staff.
Yes.
All right, if we eliminate those 2 permitted uses today per staff's request, what has to happen if the petitioner comes back with a beautifully designed, workable, pedestrian-friendly drive-through restaurant plan? What would have to happen?
They would have to, well, so let me jump back to the first part. I guess you could circle back with the applicants to see if hearing this discussion, if they've changed their opinion about removing those 2 uses. That'd be the first step. And if they're still not in agreement with removing those 2 uses, then per the city attorney's office, really the 2 options for the board are to take action on what is submitted and recommend approval, or recommend denial. And if you choose to recommend denial, you can establish those comments of why you went that way. So that's the first piece, I guess, is if they're willing to remove those uses or not. But in the grand scheme of things, if they said, yeah, we'll remove those uses, and just know that if we did come back with something well-designed in the future, what staff would say at that point in the future is you need to bring in a special use site plan to show something that does a lot of the things that I mentioned, and Mr. Kleindens mentioned, to have the building pulled up to the street, to make it walkable, and to have those circulation areas not impact the pedestrian walkability of that area. Does that answer your question, Clarence?
It does. Thank you, Aaron.
So as an alternative, could we potentially propose the applicant that maybe leave off the convenience store into things and let them keep the restaurant with drive-through? I don't know if they'd be willing to compromise on that. To me, there's a big difference there. And to Clarence's earlier point, I think there's plenty of instances you can look around and see where restaurants with drive-throughs can be situated in a environment similar to this and not be set back from the street with parking in front and lines around the building. There's ways to do it. We've got them locally. They've got them all over the state. They could still kind of keep with the nature of the surrounding area. Big difference in gas pumps. I'm not really sure how you do.
So in response to your comments, Jason, I guess first is the board could always ask the applicant, the applicants there, if they're willing to just remove convenience store. Just know on, if there's a question and the applicants are in agreement and we're going to go that route, that still is restaurant with drive-through there, but no assurances that it will be designed in the manner that you described. So if that's the direction we're going, just know that there's nothing that assures it will be a well-designed urban kind of pedestrian oriented restaurant. So I would just say that, and like I say, if the board would like to ask questions of the applicants, I know they're here as well.
You know, I thought I'd asked the question earlier. They were, well, I did, if either of those were uses that they wanted to, but I will call them back just to see, after hearing this discussion, what thought they have. So Luke, if you would like to respond, or Drew, whichever.
Yeah, I'll let Drew answer your specific questions in regards to the uses, whether they remain or not. But you know, again, keep in mind, light industrial from that standpoint, by right today, we can do anything. They can pull the building up or away from the street and have trucks running 24/7 in that location. So, I mean, that's a discussion. But Drew, I'll let you answer in regards to whether you want to continue forward with the uses or look at specific conditions that we might add to that.
Sure. No, I definitely understand. And I think, I mean, right now, we just, without knowing where things are headed, I mean, even just any limiting on what's allowed by right through E just seemed to kind of possibly close doors down the road. I mean, but it's no path that we're planning on heading on. It's pretty early on right now. And as was mentioned, I mean, we're working on incorporating the 3 other corners on that intersection. So it wouldn't be, I mean, we've worked from, I guess, 7th Street up to 12th through that area, just trying to have consistency and working through that. But that's pretty much the main thing, is just not taking that flexibility out now without knowing where things are headed.
I would certainly second what Jason's concern, what I was hearing Jason's concern. It's just too, it's too easy to put a gas station right on Martin Luther King right there and really interrupt the pedestrian flow of that area with the way that traffic moves through. I mean, the thinking was that Martin Luther King there would really divert traffic around the city, and I can understand why a developer would want to put a gas station there. I just don't think it's the right place when you've got Ramcat and you've got people from all the bars walking in that section and trying to walk to restaurants, and we're struggling with pedestrian movement across Martin Luther King right there anyway.
That makes sense.
Yeah, the other concern I have is if we were to allow this with these uses included, the 2 objectionable uses, it does in a way set a precedent for other rezonings in the future. So we have to look to that, because this may not just have consequences beyond this one site. And if we really are serious about this area developing in the way that we would like to see it, I think we need to be careful about what we allow in the E rezonings. And I think the limitations that are suggested here are very appropriate for this site.
Thank you, Ms. Dunnigan. Would anyone else from the planning board like to speak?
I think Jack's trying to speak, but he's muted.
Okay. Thank you, Aaron. Staff, if you will, help my memory. Is Martin Luther King a minor thoroughfare, collector street? What is its classification?
It's classified, Jack, as a boulevard, which is really comparable to a major thoroughfare. The capacity there with that lane width is 19,500 cars per day. And right now, the latest count is about 9,600 cars per day.
That's really interesting. One follow-up question specific to Martin Luther King is, do we have pedestrian-oriented sidewalks along either or both sides of that street in this area today to provide for that pedestrian environment?
Well, there are sidewalks along both sides of 8th Street in front of this property, yes.
Okay. All right,
Actually, on all the adjacent streets.
Great. I just didn't recall. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion.
All right.
I move that the planning board find that the request is consistent with the comprehensive plan.
Been motion by Mr. Lamb. Is there a second?
Second, Jason Grubbs.
Second by Mr. Grubbs. Any further discussion? Mr. King, would you please call the roll?
Yes. George Bryan,
Yes.
Melinda Dunnigan,
Yes.
Jason Grubbs,
Yes.
Tommy Hicks,
Yes.
Clarence Lamb,
Yes.
Chris Leak,
Yes.
Johnny Seegers,
Yes.
Brenda Smith,
Yes.
Jack Steelman.
Yes.
Okay, it's 9-0.
Okay, and Mr. Chairman, I'd like to move that the planning board recommend approval of W3444 and eliminate convenience store and restaurant with drive-through service as permitted uses.
Clarence, I'll jump in real quick on that.
Sorry.
Unless the petitioners had a change of heart, I asked that specific question to Jerry Contos, assistant city or deputy city attorney. And unless there's a willingness on the applicant's part to agree to that, the planning board would either need to go with approval or denial. And again, if you can choose to make whatever comments to support, but unless they're agreeable, those are your two options.
Okay, well, those are my two options. I'll change my motion. I move that the planning board recommend denial of W3444.
Motion by Mr. Lamb, seconded by Mr. Bryan. Any further discussion? Mr. King, would you please call the roll?
George Bryan.
Yeah.
Was that yes?
Yes.
Okay. Melinda Dunnigan.
Yes.
Jason Grubbs.
No.
Tommy Hicks.
No.
Clarence Lamb.
Yes.
Chris Leak.
Yes.
Johnny Seegers.
No.
Brenda Smith.
Yes.
Jack Steelman.
No.
It looks like that passes 5-4 for the recommendation for denial. And that'll bring us, Mr. Chairman, to I think it's going to be the last item on your agenda, which is item B3, and that is a UDO amendment that Dakota will be presenting to you. So it looks like Amy's getting that pulled up, and I will turn it over to Dakota. It looks like he's trying to get unmuted.
Okay, sorry about that. My space key, I think some dust got under it from construction and hasn't been working quite well. All right, so hello, my name is Dakota. I'm with planning staff, and we are hoping that you will agree to this graphics amendment we're doing for the UDO. Sorry, next slide. The background, most of the team staff had been working with right planners in preparing a new UDO that was unveiled at the beginning of the year, which has a great layout and is much more user-friendly than the old one. But one of the key recommendations that was left out that we were not able to get to yet was adding graphics to the UDO, updating the existing ones and also adding new ones where needed. And so to further that goal, I and other staff members have been working for the last about 6 months to get a unified graphic style and also a easily readable, user-friendly graphics prepared for the new UDO. The current graphics that we have come up with in the current style we're using has been reviewed by the permit office and also by land use administration staff. It was also presented in front of Farnsworth County's Quarterly Development Forum, along with a subgroup of the Winston-Salem Neighborhood Alliance. After some needed fixes and stuff, everyone greatly appreciated and approved of the graphics as they are. Next slide, please. So this is an example of the graphics that are currently in the UDO and what we are looking to update and improve upon. Just increasing clarity, increasing image quality, and just making it a little bit better. Next slide, please.
Okay.
So this would be an example of the new graphics. This is a example of a flag lot. We spent a lot of time working on making sure labels were easily legible, that the graphic was clean and not adding excess information to it, so you get exactly what you need from it. Next slide. This is an example. So we started doing graphics in section 4, the zoning dimensional requirements. And so a lot of the zoning districts all have their own set of dimensional requirements that we've gone through and are making graphics for, to kind of combine a pretty dense chart into a easier to read and comprehend graphic. So this is a RS30 example. Next slide, please. This would be example of parking in a RSQ Quadruplex district, I believe it was. How parking would be set up in the either side or rear. Next slide, please. This is an example of a quadruplex in the multifamily district, RM5, both representing a quadruplex, but also the graphics along with it. Next slide. And then we have a 3 to 4 unit townhouse from the same district, noting the differences between a quadruplex and a 3 to 4 unit townhouse. Next slide. So in summary, this is the first installment of UDO graphics. We plan on releasing more in the exact same style. It's sort of been a process, especially with COVID, kind of getting sure all the right people have reviewed it and sent back their inputs so changes could be made. But we've kind of gotten back into the swing of things with that, and should be releasing more soon. Another thing I should note, just in case it wasn't clear, is that we are not amending any text in the UDO. We are only adding graphics. No text is changing. We are using what is already in the UDO. And we did believe that Section 4 zoning districts was the best place to start, because it contains a lot of dimensional requirements and a lot of special uses and stuff that needed to be cleared up. Staff recommends approval of this amendment. If you have any questions, please let me know.
Dakota, I just had a comment.
Sure.
First of all, I think these are great. I think you've done a wonderful job. They're very clear and readable. My only real comment about it is just, you have RSQ, which has all these different subparts to it: single family, duplex, twin homes, triplex, and same thing with RM5.
Yes.
And then you have a number of different graphics that go with each. I just think as a reader that it's clearer if you would label under each one. Like, so for the first one in RSQ, if you just labeled single family under the single family one, so that the reader, as they're looking, don't have to hunt around and look at the dimensional requirements and figure out which one it is.
Great.
So it just, it's simpler and that's just my only one comment.
Good idea.
I'm
Thank you,
actually
Ms.
surprised. Unless something happened with the layout, I thought they were labeled by name. My apologies on that.
Melinda, this is Aaron. Point well taken, and we can certainly add those clarifying labels for each one in there as it goes up to council. If Dakota can check, we'll look after the meeting and see if they're not in there. We can certainly add those clarifying labels to make that clear to the reader.
Yes.
Thank you for noting that, Ms. Donegan.
Is this a public hearing?
Appreciate it.
Are there any other questions for staff?
I have just one, and that is for an explanation of why an illustration of rear yard parking is only included on one of the drawings.
If I remember correctly, and now I am not an expert on the UDO, though I certainly have spent a lot of time with it. I believe that one had very specific dimensional requirements that were not present in the other ones in the section of graphics that we are currently releasing. There are parking requirements, just general parking requirements in the UDO, but in the zoning districts section that we have done so far, I think that was the only one that had very specific zoning requirements.
And Mr. Steelman, if I could just reiterate a little bit what Aaron said and also what Dakota said. This wasn't meant to be exhaustive in illustrating every principle of even section 4 of the UDO at this point. Again, these 24 graphics that Dakota spent the last few months putting together was really just to go ahead and get some things out there, and we can always go back, and the board's welcome to make suggestions for future graphics as well, and there's more to come on this is what I would leave you all with.
Well, I'll say it's a great start. Thank you all.
To answer, I did hear a question earlier by Mr. Lamb. This is a public hearing. I'm not sure if anyone has signed up to speak for or against, but it definitely is a public hearing.
We don't have anybody here signed up to speak on this item, and as the board moves into this, you'll need a motion on consistency and a motion on the actual text amendment itself.
Okay, then at this point, I'm going to close the public hearing. What is the pleasure of the board?
I move that the planning board, Mr. Chairman, this is Clarence. I move that the planning board find that the amendment is consistent with the comprehensive plan.
Motion by Mr. Lamb.
A second.
Seconded by Ms. Smith. Mr. King, if you please call the roll.
Yes. George Bryan.
Yes.
Melinda Donegan.
Yes.
Jason Grubbs.
Yes.
Tommy Hicks.
Mr. Hicks.
My apology, couldn't get off of mute. Yes.
Clarence Lamb.
Yes.
Chris Leak.
Yes.
Johnny Seegers.
Yes.
Brenda Smith.
Yes.
Jack Steelman.
Yes.
Okay, 9-0.
And Mr. Chairman, this is Clarence. I move that the planning board recommend approval of UDO CC3.
That's a motion by Mr. Lamb.
Second, Jason Grubbs.
Second by Mr. Grubbs. Mr. King, if you please call the roll.
George Bryan.
Yes.
Melinda Donegan.
Yes.
Jason Grubbs.
Yes.
Tommy Hicks.
Yes.
Clarence Lamb.
Yes.
Chris Leak.
Yes.
Johnny Seegers.
Yes.
Brenda Smith.
Yes.
Jack Steelman.
Yes.
All right, that passes 9-0.
Thank you, Dakota. Really appreciate it. All right, I think we're now moving to staff report.
Yes. A few things to share, Mr. Chair and board members. First of all, thanks to Councilmember Scipio for joining us this afternoon and spending some time virtually.
Thank you, Ms. Scipio.
Thank you for joining us there. At first, I'll recognize Desmond to just give you a quick snapshot of what to expect for your July meeting, and then we'll talk about that July meeting a little bit more. So I'll turn it over to Desmond.
Thank you, Aaron. Board, you may recall earlier at the very beginning of this meeting that you voted to continue one of the cases that was originally on the agenda. So that case is to rezone from GB to EL. That case will be on your July agenda. In addition, there are two general use rezoning requests that are on the agenda, another limited use request, and then one last special use zoning request. And other than that, there isn't anything else on the agenda.
Great. Thank you, Desmond. So looking a little bit ahead to our schedule, first thing I'll come to is your work session on June 25th. And I think at our last meeting, we talked about, we're clearly going to do that one as a virtual meeting. So it'll be a Zoom meeting. So you'll get the invites and we'll do all the things we've done previously. We do have several items coming to you at that meeting. And one of those I will just give you sort of a heads up on is usually around this time of year, we are starting to talk about a work program for the upcoming year. And obviously with all of the issues surrounding COVID-19, that has disrupted the existing year's work plan and really clouded the forecast for next year. So I've been working with staff, and what I will be bringing to you to begin the discussion at your June work session is a 6-month work program. And that 6 month, there are several items that there's a lot of items we were not able to complete this year because of COVID-19, and there's still a lot of work to be done on those. So essentially, it's really more of a continuation work program that would get us through the end of calendar year 2020. And what I would propose to do with the board is to come back to you at your October work session with a proposal for a work plan for the final 6 months of the fiscal year. So that's what you will see probably when we sit down to discuss this in June is a lot of what we kind of talked about on the current year's work program and some other things that have come at us that we're going to have to address in the near term. So I just wanted to kind of give you a heads up. That's one of the things we'll be discussing. We've got several other items, so it'll be a pretty involved work session on June 25th. And again, we'll be doing that virtually. As we look ahead to your public hearing in July, that is July the 9th. And so I spoke with the chair this morning. In-person meetings are beginning to resume in somewhat of a limited fashion here in the city and the county. City Council this coming Monday on June 15th will be meeting as a board in person. They will be meeting in the Benton Convention Center. And there's some options for that. So what I shared with the chair is the planning board has the option for July 9th. If you would like to meet in person, we can set that up and we can do it. It will be at the Benton Convention Center. If you don't want to go that route, we can still meet virtually as we have done the past 2 meetings. And I believe the chair wanted to kind of get some comments from the board members as to which way you're leaning on that. Like I say, we can accommodate either way. Just let us know.
Aaron, do you have any more?
Go ahead, Brent.
Go ahead, George. Okay, I'll stop. Aaron, do you have any more details about how the meeting area is going to be set up when we do this, if we were to go to the convention center?
So next Monday, the 15th, will probably shed a lot of light on that. Brenda, I believe that room and that location was chosen because as you come in, you've got wide, expansive corridors to get the public in. You can open double doors and let the public flow through so that if they do show up, they're not in close proximity. Of course, hand sanitizing and PPE and things of that nature, chairs spaced out at least 6 feet apart, and then the board would be spaced out at least 6 feet apart or more. So we would get a sneak peek at that this Monday night, and we would probably mirror a similar setup if the board chose to meet in person in July.
Okay, thank you.
Aaron, I wasn't at all sure, and if Ms. Scipio is still on, the meeting Monday, I wasn't sure if the city council was inviting the public because we were still under the 25 person limit. And so what I would like to know is that meeting that we're looking at, would we still be under the 25 person limit, which would include council, the planning board and the staff, and would eliminate the public? And if so, then I would just as soon meet with Zoom. But if we could allow public in, then that would change my mind.
Ms. Councilmember Scipio, I don't know if you care to comment on that. If you do, certainly feel free to unmute yourself and provide any comment that you would like.
Yes, sir. Thank you. I was just trying to find an email that just got sent out today that the council is going to be meeting publicly. The original plans was to have the public meet in another room. And now I believe the public is not being invited, but the council will be in the ballroom, but the public is not being invited, and that public comments will be made or taken over the phone. And I was trying to see the latest, there was an announcement that, here we go. The Winston-Salem City Council will hold a public hearing on the proposed city budget during its 7 p.m. Monday meeting. The council also will hold a public hearing on proposed economic development assistance, blah, 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 blah. To protect public health, all citizen participation in the meeting will be conducted by telephone. Citizens who wish to address the council during the meeting should call a particular number. So that's what's happening. The council will meet at the Benton to allow council members and city staff to maintain social distancing. Residents can watch the meeting live on WSTV, et cetera, and watch online. So it's public for the council, not the public coming in.
Yeah,
thank you, Ms. Scipio. And I think, George, I think you bring up an interesting point. As much as I miss everyone, I think if public is not invited, we can just continue with our Zoom meeting in July.
I agree.
I'm comfortable with that.
Right. And then once public is back, then we can have another conversation. But at least right now, I think this is working better than we anticipated. So.
And we're getting all of our planning board members.
When are we going to discuss this as an option for going forward?
Mr. Chair, I'll apologize on that. That information that Councilman Scipio shared, I just got the same text from marketing. So apparently that changed from our conversation earlier today. I was not aware of that. So we will plan on hosting your July 9th meeting by Zoom. We will continue to do that moving forward. The other thing I will mention for you for your July meeting, that is traditionally the meeting where the board elects chair and vice chair. So just to give you a heads up that if you're interested, we'll put that on the agenda. If you would like to move that down the road, I think we've done that in August and September before, but just to let you know, that's per your bylaws, the meeting when chair and vice chair are elected. So the only other thing I would share with you is, I don't know if the board is aware, you may be, you may not, I think it was on our work program for the current year, is planning. The planning division will be moving to the 3rd floor of the Stewart building that we're in. And that would be in an effort to get planning and inspection, since we are a combined department, to get us on one floor, which will make life much, much easier for us and hopefully for our customers that we serve as well. So that is, that plan started earlier this year. It's been expedited and
can't hear you.
I'm sorry. Was there a comment? I was sorry on that.
We could hear. I could hear you, Aaron. I don't know if George. I don't know if George could hear you.
Yeah, George seemed to have lost audio. I think the rest of us have it.
I'm good.
Come back.
Okay.
Great.
So all that to say that move has been expedited. We've got some folks coming in to pack up our belongings and get ready for that move. So kind of the sequence of events, Winston-Salem DOT, I believe, has indicated they're trying to be out of the space upstairs by July 31st, and they will be moving to Union Station. We will be moving into their space. And then once we are out, utilities will be moving into our space. And once utilities is out, the city council members will be moving into the utility space. You can see Councilmember Scipio is very happy about that on the third floor in City Hall. And once their offices are vacated, I believe the plan is for property facility maintenance staff to move into the former council member offices there on the main floor of City Hall. So there will be a lot of moving around going on for the balance of this year. But just to let you know, we will be moving. So we're starting to make some good progress on that.
Mr. King, is the planning staff at 100% occupancy now, or is it still a staggered staff?
So we are still staggered, very much so. When we began to get into COVID-19, what we quickly realized is that a good portion of our staff had the ability to telework from home effectively. And so our staff has been doing that throughout COVID-19, which has been good because it's been able to reduce possible exposure and spread of COVID-19. Obviously, as we've kind of run up against a wall here with packing, we had to bring folks back in so that we could start packing up our stuff here. And so what I've worked with Chris and Kirk and our management team on is to try to come up with a staggered schedule, almost an A team, B team. And we've kind of set that up depending on where folks sit in the office so that we don't have folks coming in close proximity to each other, and also trying to stagger start, stop schedules so we're not having folks come in at 8 and 5 and leaving at the same time. So we've been trying to stagger that as much as possible to keep folks away from each other. And of course, when folks are here in the building, they are wearing masks, hand sanitizing, trying to keep 6 feet apart as much as practically possible.
All right, thank you. Anything else from any of the board members or Mr. King? Anything from you?
That's all.
All right. If not, Ms. Smith?
Yes, motion to adjourn. Got it.
Everyone have a great remainder of the week.
Good job with the meeting, Chairman.
Good job.
Thank you.